Ag PhD full episodes and more are now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about removing straw or stalks from fields after harvest.
Well, specifically when we look at small grains, we look at things like wheat and oats. I know growing up on our farm, we had livestock at home, so we were raising the grain portion of those crops for feed in a lot of cases, and we'd put that into different rations for the animals. But we had all this straw out in the field, and Brian and I kind of thought that Dad was just doing it a little bit to punish us, but we would bale them all up in small bales. Brian actually really enjoyed that whole process.
I thought it was awesome. So it was a great workout program and got to be outside. It was fun.
But it was so itchy, Brian. The oats were just so itchy to work around.
It was just fine for me. So anyway, the reason why we're talking about this today is we do get a lot of questions, especially from non-farmers, about this residue that is out in fields. And then even some farmers say, boy, if you remove the residue, then that's not good. Your soil organic matter levels are going to go way down. Well, that's not exactly true. Let me start with that real quick. So where organic matter gets built is typically from below ground, the roots. If you leave those roots intact, that's where a lot of the organic matter is coming from. What's above ground, that residue, that's mainly to protect the soil. So it's mainly to reduce erosion and that kind of thing. So sure, it's possible earthworms could pull some of that residue down and that eventually could become organic matter, but that's a very, very low percentage.
Yeah, and when you think about it, as you're baling up the straw out in the fields, you aren't really cutting it down to the dirt. You're generally leaving a little bit, maybe it's 3 or 4 inches, maybe it's even a little bit taller. So there is still quite a bit of cover out there for the field.
Okay, so how many nutrients are we removing from the field? That's one of the other big questions. There's going to be some, but the biggest nutrient that is left in stalks and in residue is potassium. But a lot of potassium starts flushing out of that plant with rainfall late in the season. And if, let's say that you have that straw or that residue out there, even for a few days, you get a little rain on it, a lot of the potassium drops out of there. So how many nutrients are going to leave the field? We don't know exactly. You'd have to actually test some of that straw or residue to find out for sure, okay, how much NPK micronutrients are in there. It's some, it's just not a ridiculous amount most of the time.
Now, when we were growing up, we had livestock at home and we were using the straw for bedding for the livestock. So we'd spread it out in their pens, in their areas, and they'd lay down and sleep in it and chew on it, whatever. But we'd eventually spread all that straw back in the field when we spread the manure out. As we scooped those pens out, we put it right back in the field. So if you're in one of those situations where, yeah, I'm going to take it off, but I'm going to put it back, you really aren't losing anything.
Yep, and that's where we get a lot of these questions from non-farmers is, okay, you're pulling all this material off, what's going back in the ground and that kind of thing. Yeah, a lot of times it is going back as manure. Otherwise, there are farmers that, hey, they're trying to sell grain, they're trying to sell the straw off, and over time, maybe they are depleting the organic matter a little bit, but there are other ways around that too. So like on our farm, for example, when they cut silage, they're taking all that residue off, we seed a cover crop in, and that helps bring some of that material back into the ground. So there are a lot of ways to do this thing. We just wanted to talk about it because we think it's kind of interesting, and every farmer seems to approach it a little bit differently.
Well, one thing that you may see out in any of those fields, whether you're chopping the straw off there or just harvesting the grain, is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?